What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Lumsden Motorsports Garage. I'm Wade Lumsden, and in this video we're gonna kind of go back to some of the engine stuff, or rather engine related stuff. I know we've been working a lot on suspension and we aren't quite done with that stuff, but we're gonna move on to some of the engine stuff, particularly like some fuel line, a couple upgrade things that I'm gonna do, and we'll go from there. So remember, if you like what we're doing, and you want to keep following this wonderful adventure, especially with it being the road to Bristol, right? We only got a couple weeks left, so make sure you like and subscribe. It helps the channel out and I really appreciate it. So with that being said, let's get to work. All right, so one of the first things I'm going to go over here is my fuel lines. I ended up reusing the return line here. There was nothing wrong with it. It wasn't cracked out very bad, but my fuel pickup line was actually cracked out. It didn't have any holes in it, didn't really have any leaks in it, but just to be safe, rather than having one pop up in the middle of a race halfway through the season, I went ahead and replaced this fuel line. So I already ran all of it. Sorry I didn't show you guys all that stuff, but a mixture of pressed for time, and also I didn't think that was something that you guys would greatly care about, other than maybe how to put fittings in a hose. But yeah, anyways, I'll show you what I did with the fuel line. I ran it kind of how I did before, except for right here is where I had my fuel filter before, and I moved it up a little bit, just to give myself that opportunity to possibly reach through from the front of the car to get to it. I really wanted to put it like right here to where it was really easy to get to without removing a body panel or crawling underneath, but I just couldn't find a spot that I really like to mount this. Of course, mine's pretty long, but it is what it is. And then the hose, it goes down here. Down to here. That's down where my transponder mounts, right? And then right here you'll see I added a fuel cutoff, and I'll explain here in a second why I did that. And then up to my fuel pump, and then from my fuel pump up, that's actually the line I had before, up to my regulator. And then, of course, to the fuel log, which is not 100% hooked up. And I'll kind of explain why it's like that, too. So you can see that I also put a fuel cutoff here. Reason being, I came to find that I was having issues with fuel getting down into the cylinders while I was transporting my car. So it was suggested to me to put a fuel cutoff in right here. I decided to put it after the regulator, and this is the fuel return line, right? So when I cut this off and the car's still running, it's gonna suck the fuel out of the bowls to make it to where when I'm traveling around, the fuel doesn't overflow into the bowl and put fuel into a cylinder. But I put it after the regulator so that when I do that, it doesn't deadhead my fuel pump, and instead it feeds it back through the return line and back into the tank. Now, the main reason why I was kind of pushing for that is I have this piston style fuel pump, and it does not ever really seem to like to be primed. So I definitely don't want to lose prime on that fuel pump. So I'm doing everything I can to try to limit the fuel going into the carburetor, without damaging the pump or anything like that. And then, you know, we come down here and we take a look at this one. The reason why I put this one in here is so I can cut the fuel off and just as a second safety, really, to keep fuel possibly from draining out of the tank or gravity feeding out of the tank down in and up and all that other happy stuff. I mean, that's unlikely, but that's a possibility. Plus, it's a nice little cutoff to allow me to leave fuel in this line that goes to the fuel pump, just in case I have to pull my fuel filter, and that'll kind of leave it at least this portion partially primed for when I go to fire it back up. So that's going to be it basically for the fuel line. I still need to finish hooking up all these things, and the main reason why this got hooked up is going to be part of actually our next project. So fuel pump, regulator, you can see how it sticks out. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a piece that was just NPT in here and then just and then the dash, I believe this was dash 8 out. There was this, it's kind of a bulkhead fitting, so the fitting is actually over here, right? And then there was this long extension inside there. I couldn't find one that didn't have that, so this is what I went with, which actually pushed it out a little bit farther from the block than what it was. And I was worried about clearance. And I'll show you what I was worried about clearance for. So the main reason why I wanted to get all this mocked up is because I went and got myself this. A 1-wire 50 amp alternator. For the longest time, I've just never run an alternator. I always just charge up my battery in between races and call it good. But, you know, I run an HEI distributor. HEI distributors love voltage. What better way to give it more voltage than to give it an alternator? I mean, there's other options out there. You can always go with a, you know, 16 volt battery and pay the $300 or $400, whatever it is for the charger for that. Or you can put an alternator on it, and this will supply the 14 point whatever volts, nice and steady, and you don't have to worry about your battery dying on you. So, but I will show you why I wanted to mock this up. So these are the two mounting points here, and it mounts at the water pump. So here, and there's actually spacers that go in here, and I just wanted to make sure that this fit. So I'm going to kind of mock hold it where it's going to go, and as you can see, it's going to be a tight squeeze. So I might have to do something fancy dancy with my fittings here just to make it to where everything fits right, but it looks like this is gonna work, which will be awesome. And the other thing that we're gonna do here is I'm gonna go to a 4-bladed metal fan. I actually have been running this plastic flex fan down here for an extremely long time. As far back as I can remember, I kind of got hooked on them. But here lately, it seems like I continue to have issues with the blades getting cracked out. It's just really not something I want to deal with. I'm afraid that one of these days it's going to come apart and put a hole in a radiator or something important. So I'm going to go to this 4-bladed metal fan and see how that works out for me. Thought I'd get you in a little bit closer and show you what I'm talking about for the cracking out of this fan. As you can see, it's missing chunks. So and it's not because the fan is junk. It's just because I seem to get like rocks or whatever sucked up in there, and it cracks the fan out. So it's a good fan. I really like it, but can't necessarily run it if it keeps breaking like that. All right, so I went ahead and installed the alternator and the new fan. I had to go get a different spacer. It is much closer to the radiator. The fan now is much closer to the radiator than it was before, but I had to go get a new spacer. This bad boy is a 1.5 inches. They suggest 1.5 inches to give you space between the alternator and the fan, and as you can tell, there's not a whole lot of space there, but there is space, so that's going to be good. And then I also needed to actually space this alternator out just a little bit more. So you can see, I ended up having to add a washer up here, and down below it's kind of hard to see there, but I ended up having to add 4 washers there. The bottom spacer just wasn't quite long enough to keep everything square. So got everything installed there. That's why all of this was in place, and as you can see now, we got plenty of space behind it. That makes me feel good. But before I go ahead and hook up all of the fuel line, we're gonna pop open these valve covers and we're gonna do valve springs. Currently, all of the valve springs are backed off from when I winterized the motor. You can see that from my little note. We'll take the valve covers off, and I'm gonna go over how to do valve springs. I'll probably only show you how to do it on one set. That way I can, blast through the rest of them. All right, so I'm gonna start over here on the passenger side. I'm gonna go ahead and take valve covers off. Mine have little studs, so I'm taking off nuts to hold them down. I highly suggest that if you're a guy that's been using bolts. Those are a pain in the ass, so I strongly suggest the nut method. Here's my valves. I got roller rockers, roller tip rockers, and all of these are backed off. They're backed off from when I winterized my car. Keeps the valves closed, keeps from anything from getting down into the cylinders and stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and do some of these and show you how. So you'll take off your rocker arms, and I like to keep everything paired up, so off to the side I'll be setting them in their pairs. So the other thing that I didn't point out, so all of these are backed off, all of them, but right now all of my spark plugs are still in, and we are going to use the air method to keep the valves up. So next thing I'm going to need to do is take my spark plug out of this cylinder. All right, so now what we're going to use is, I'm going to use my cylinder leak down tester to do this, but I mean, you can use direct shop air if you want to with like a compression tester, but make sure, for safety, make sure you're using something that you can regulate. So if you're going to regulate it at your compressor, or if you have a regulator within your line, that's the important thing here. So I'm going to use my cylinder leak down tester to do that. I think the reason why I like to do it this way is probably because this is the first way I learned how to do it. Because I was also doing a leak check to see if any of my valves were leaking at the same time, which you can do that, right? You close all the valves, pump air to it, and if you got crazy amount of air coming out of here, coming out of your exhaust or coming out of your intake, then you know that one of your valves is still open, which means it could be bent, it could be burnt, it could, you know, could be a couple things. So it's also a good way to check the health of those valves while you're doing this. All right, got my hose installed. Now I need to hook up my air compressor and get air built. So unfortunately I don't have a ginormous air compressor. I just have a little bitty Harbor Freight one, but it'll get the job done. It's just a lot more noise and it's going to run a lot more than having a big air compressor. So let me get that going and then we'll come back here and start hooking up. All right, so as you can see here, got my hose hooked up to one side, I got my air compressor hooked up to the other side, and we're gonna go ahead and feed some air to the cylinder nice and slow. And as long as you don't have any leaky seals or any leaky valves or anything like that, it should hold a nice seal, enough for you to take these valves out without the valves dropping down. Take the valves off. We're going to use this fancy schmancy tool here. This is kind of old school. They got a bunch of different ones. They got some that'll, you know, screw down onto your stud here, and then you can use, you know, lever action to get those to come out and pull the retainers and all that other happy stuff. They also have the ones on the bench that clamp around the head, but we're in the car. This is what I got. This is what we're going to use. I take a socket, go over the top of it, give it some taps. Same thing on this other side. That really loud popping noise is the valve going down and the air coming out. There we go. And then once you can tap it and it doesn't make that noise, you know that it's loose, that the spring's actually moving without moving the valve as well. So a couple love taps. Back to this. Right. So I got to push down just a little bit here. And I'm going to get the valve retainers out of the way with a magnet. One. Come down to the other side here. Two. Now you can pull that up. Yeah. Now that spring's not supposed to be left behind. Whew, there we go. That is normally not supposed to be hung up like that. So now you're gonna back this off. See how it's nice and crushed down there, so we'll back this off. Pull it out. You're gonna want to keep the top retainer there. All right, so you didn't really get to see it, but this is a valve spring shim. Okay, it rides underneath the valve spring. Here's the one that was next to it, in a little bit better shape. That bad boy is messed up. So I'm actually kind of glad we're doing this. There are steps that can be taken to measure what valve spring shims you need, but I'm not going to go over that here. Really what I'm going to do, I ended up having to buy an entire set, so all I'm going to do is continue on with my valve spring replacement, and I'm going to replace the shims as we go, just for peace of mind, really. I mean, they weren't that expensive. I think they were like $12 for a box of shims. But that's where the bottom of the spring rides, is on top of that shim. I guess I can show you. So spring, this sets down on the top, boom, and that rides on the shim, which gives you the distance that you want from the top of the retainer here down to the head where the shim rests. You want that to be in a specific spot for your cam and all that other happy stuff, but we're not going to go over that here. So let's go ahead and start putting the valve springs back in. So my new valve springs, I just got the exact same as what I had before, comp cams. They work good. I like them. So we're gonna do the exact same ones again. I do not run a different intake versus exhaust. Some guys do. That's up to you, your cam, your engine builder, all that other happy stuff. But here's my valve spring. Brand new, looks beautiful. Then I gotta take out the new shim, put my shim in place. Again, you can verify your shim by measuring it, thickness, and there's also an inside diameter that you're gonna worry about, and an outside diameter. Boom. And they are what I want. All right, so I'm gonna place one on each one of these, slide it down in place. Beautiful. And this is where some of the fun starts. All right, so I got pretty good amount of air pressure in there, pushing up on them valves to keep them up. We are going to go ahead and try to install our spring. Here you got, make sure you put your cap on, put this on, or sorry, put your valve spring retainer, top retainer on, clamp it down in hand, then we're going to go ahead and shove it on here. There you have it. And then once you got it pushed down past the top of the valve stem, go ahead and put your retaining clips in. That's one. I gotta get the other one in. Alright. Make sure it's nice and seated. Let me grab you here. Okay, make sure your retainers are nice and seated inside there before you take this up, before you take the compressor off. So nice and seated in there. Now we're gonna back the compressor off, and boom, there you have it. Now you're gonna check and look, make sure it's nice and seated. The other thing I like to do is kind of like we did before with the tapping of the spring to loosen this up. I kind of like the tap just to get a good seat on it. Give it a good little bounce around. Now when you're doing that, some guys actually remove these seats by doing this, and they just whack with a huge hit and just try to catch everything that comes off, which I mean, I guess you can do that, but I've never had any luck with that. So I try not to do that. I have to do it with the compressors and stuff. So we still have this cylinder compressed. We're going to go ahead and get the next one installed. So here we have the new spring. Again, this is 3 springs. There's this outer one, an inner kind of flat looking spring. You can see it in there. And then an internal, much smaller spring that's just like this outside one, but just shoved in the inside. So unfortunately, my little compressor only grabs the outside spring. So I end up having to push down against this inner spring to get it to go down far enough for me to get the retainers on. And sorry for the background noise. That's actually my little Harbor Freight compressor sitting outside around the corner with my garage door shut for me to be able to have enough shop pressure, air pressure, to do this. So that poor little thing's working hard. All right. We've already replaced the shims down below. We got the upper retainer cap. Finish backing this all the way off. Okay. Then I like to grab it as low as I possibly can. Right about there, right? As low as I can. That way it gives me plenty of room to compress. And I like to hold it in here just to keep things from flying apart on me. So see how my inner spring is starting to pop out? Not necessarily what I want, but it's what I got to deal with, right? So at least that's a light enough spring I can push it down. I'm not necessarily saying that's going to be the case with every set of springs, but for me, I can. I mean, I'm a 250-pound guy. I should be able to push down on a little spring here. And start pushing it down on. Okay. Grab my retainers. Push down on the spring. Get my retainer shoved in. I gotta get the other one put in. Awesome. In. I'm gonna back it off. Unclip, pull out. There we have it. And my little tap, tap, taparoo. There you have it, valve spring installed. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do these going back. I like to just do them in sets of 2, so I'm gonna set my rocker arms back on here, and I am not tightening these at all. They are going to be left extremely loose, like that. And we'll end up having to come back and do the valves after we get all this madness finished up. So I'm going to go ahead and do some more of these, and here we go. But now I can back off my air, maybe give my air compressor a chance to catch up. Maybe. Go ahead and put my spark plug back in. I had just changed my spark plugs before the end of the year last year. I was going to go to Las Vegas and race the Duel in the Desert, but unfortunately I came down, I got my car all ready to go and was ready to go race, and I got that phone call that I came down positive with COVID. So I had done a lot of prep to the car before all that, and never got to use them. So spark plugs are basically brand new, so I'm going to be good. I don't have to change those out. So we'll go ahead and move over to the next set. Now, there is another way that you can do this to hold the valves up in place. You can take a piece of rope, okay, or thick string or something extremely soft like that. Most people use rope, and you can fish it down into the cylinder through the spark plug hole, and then by hand turn the motor over, and when that piston comes up, it'll push that rope or whatever soft material you've shoved in there, it'll push that up against the valves and hold the valve shut. That way you could take all this stuff off and not have to worry about it, just like with the air. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of shoving things down there that really shouldn't be down there. There's nothing wrong with the method, to be quite honest. The only thing that you really need to worry about is around your spark plug hole. You want to make sure that is extremely clean. That way you're not grabbing a hold of any dust, dirt, debris, whatever, and fishing that down into the cylinder. So just make sure whatever you're shoving down in there is nice and clean, if that's the route you want to do it. Alright, so something I wanted to show you here. Let's see if I can make it work out. But how the retainers work. See, there's a groove on the valve here. There's a groove inside the retainer here. Okay, so what we're doing when we're pushing it down is we're trying to get this groove to ride just ever so nice right there. Okay, so when you're pushing down the valve, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get these to lock in place right there.
You turn me round, baby, round, like a record, baby, round. You spin me round, baby, round. When you go down. Like me, turn me on, baby, turn me loose. Twist and shout.
All right, gonna go over some of the stuff I did off camera here. I went ahead and got my valves adjusted. This is just my preliminary. I like to go through and adjust all of them, again, because they were all backed off. And now, once I get it to where I can fire the engine up, I will fire the engine up, let it warm up, and adjust the valves again, because I like to adjust them warm, which I do believe that's the actual proper procedure. The other thing we did here is I got myself a battery cable. This is 4-gauge wire. I think you can get away with something smaller, but I mean, this is the alternator I'm running is only a 50 amp alternator, so I think I could have gotten away with something smaller, but 4-gauge, that's good. But it runs all the way around to the back. And then with the way I have my car wired up, I was able to hook it up to the power right here at the starter. So got that all hooked up. Now what I need to do is basically de-winterize my carburetor. It's currently full of Marvel's mystery oil from letting it sit for a while. Go check out the how to winterize your car videos if that's something you want to know about. But I am going to go through the process of de-winterizing it and getting all of my fuel lines primed, so when I do want to fire this thing up, she is ready to go. So I'm gonna get started on that. First thing I'm gonna do is I use a little paint cap here. Bowl is full of Marvels, so come over. Unscrew this. Let what Marvels is in it drain out. I'm just catching as much as I can to keep from making a mess. We're also going to need to access the top here. All right, pretty much done dripping. Throw that back on there. I only ever use a nut driver because using a ratchet, I mean, and it's just nice and snug, right? Using a ratchet, you can over-reef those and strip out your bowl, which I am proud / ashamed to say that I have done before. So don't do that. And I'm gonna go ahead and dump this out in my waste oil. We're going to drain the back bowl as well. Go ahead and pull my carb hat off. And then I like to take a nice clean shop rag and set it across in my bowls here, right here. The goal is in your carburetor where the squirts come out. You're trying to catch as much of the Marvels that's going to come out with your shop rag. So I'm going to get down in there. Let me go ahead and grab it and show you. All right, so got my shop towel in here, and right here is the squirters. If I press down on it, you can see the Marvels coming out. So we're doing our best to catch as much of that as we possibly can. You're going to pump it a handful of times until it's done. Nice and slow until it's done pumping out the Marvels. We're getting a little bit still on this side. All right, looks like we're out. So now, pull that off, wipe off what I can, and we'll move to the back and do the exact same thing. Awesome. And I'm going to take another clean rag, set it in place again. Okay, same spot. So now, I love these things here. Get yourself a bottle with a nice little pour spout. Doesn't have to be this. You know, like ketchup dispensers, mustard dispensers, whatever. This was like 97 cents or something at Walmart. I love this little thing. It makes priming my fuel lines and the carburetor and all that other happy stuff. Plus I like to use this for pouring fuel in the carburetor if she's being really cold-blooded to get it to fire up. So if that's something that you end up needing. So I have methanol in mine because of course I run methanol. You can do this with gas, whatever your fuel that you're running is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna pour into these spouts here, which will fill up the bowls. You can of course take out the screws here for leveling your bowls, right? For adjusting your bowl levels. You can pull those out and squirt it in through there, but this is just as easy. And I fill up the bowl until it starts coming out of the boosters. Right there, starting to come out of the boost. The little squirt comes out of the boosters. You'll see that when you do it. I'm not going to show you here, but that means the bowl's full. And we're going to do the same thing in the back. I guess I need to actually remove my rag to do that so I can see the boosters. Boom. Awesome. So now I'm going to shove this in place. And just like we did before, with the Marvel still in it, you're going to pump some of the fuel through here until it's nice and clear. Took me 4 good pumps until it came out nice and clear. And I'll do it with another rag. This back up under here. Pump. Still a little pink. Great. All right, guys. Got the fuel lines all primed. Got the alternator wired up, and she fired up real good and ran real good. So you might be wondering what this jumble of mess is right here. This is just a little breather hose for my fuel regulator. I'm just trying to keep junk from getting into there, so I put a hose on here and then loop it around itself, because if that does get a hole in it, the regulator diaphragm inside there, if that does get a hole in it, it starts to spit fuel out a little bit. So I got this kind of wrapped up just to try to eliminate from fuel going over there and drop it back, but also to try to keep it from sucking dirt. All right, guys, thanks for watching. That's gonna be it for this video. I know it was kind of like wham bam, but like I said, I'm kind of running out of time to get ready for Bristol here, and finally with all my parts showing up and stuff, I'm wanting to just thrash and get the car ready. Plus I'm gonna kind of transition to it being more of a vlog than it is a tech video, though I do like to share any technical information I got. I don't know, give me your opinion down below as a comment. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'm gonna post as many videos as I can once I get to Bristol too, so if you want to stay up to date on that, make sure you like and subscribe so you get the notifications. I really appreciate it. And if there was anything that you'd have done better or that I missed or anything like that, make sure you comment below, and I'd really appreciate it. There was one thing that I do need to mention. I wired up my alternator. I believe I told you I was gonna wire it up down to my starter. That would be okay, except for the fact that my main cutoff switch, my big main power cutoff switch, is actually behind that. So what I need to do is actually wire my alternator to the back side of the switch, or rather the battery side of the switch, whether I connect it at the battery or connect it to where the battery connects at my switch. I have to attach it over on that side. That way when I flick my main power switch, it kills all power to the car. By running it down to my starter, what I created was a power bypass. Once the alternator starts creating voltage, it feeds power down to that starter, and then I kill my power switch, which kills power from my battery, but it doesn't exactly kill the car. So because the alternator keeps it running, it's I guess that's one of the flaws of putting your switch on the hot side, on the positive side, but you could, you know, just make sure your switch is on the negative side. So if you kill ground, then it's not grounded out anymore. But yeah, so I messed up on my original wiring job. So I'm gonna have to run that wire all the way back to the battery or back to my switch to make it to where that safety feature, and again, it is for safety, so you got to make sure that it works. So I want to make sure that that safety feature works on my car, and I'll just rerun a new wire. No big deal. A little bit of a waste of wire on my part, but that's okay. I'll probably use it in something else on some other projects. It's not like everything goes to waste around here when I mess up. So again, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, I appreciate it, and we'll see you next video.